My name is Naomi Adeyemi. I'm 31 years old and I'm a senior software engineer at Meridian Financial Technologies in Houston, Texas. I earn $119,000 a year. I have a cat named after my company, a second-floor apartment in Midtown with pink bougainvillea climbing the courtyard wall, two diplomas on the wall above my standing desk that I put up for myself, not for guests. On a Tuesday morning in October, I looked out the glass lobby doors of my office building and saw my parents sitting in a silver Toyota Camry in the second row of the visitor lot. They had been there for over 40 minutes. My coworker Priya Nair, 29, always the first one in, always quietly aware of everything happening within a 200-foot radius, had appeared at the edge of my desk at 11:15 with her coffee, cup in her hand and her voice very carefully neutral. "Hey, there's an older couple in the lot. Same spot since I got here. My manager flagged it. Didn't look up right away." I finished the line of code I was writing, a function I'd been wrestling with since 9 that morning, something efficient and clean that I was genuinely proud of. And then I turned my chair toward the lobby glass and looked. My father was in the passenger seat. He was wearing the charcoal church suit he reserved for funerals and Sunday services, the one with the narrow lapels that had never quite kept pace with the decade. My mother had a blue and gold head scarf wrapped around her hair the way she always wrapped it when she was working herself up to something difficult. To see them from 60 feet away, and even at that distance, with 3 years of silence between us, I knew every line of both of them. I want to tell you something before I take you back to the beginning. I want to be honest with you, because that's the only thing I've been able to hold on to through all of this. I didn't walk out to them. Not right away. Turned my chair back to my monitor. I put my headphones on. I opened a pull request I'd been meaning to review since Monday, and read the first 4 lines of it 3 times without absorbing a single word. Then I got up, walked to the break room at the end of the hall, poured myself coffee. I didn't want into a mug that said World's Oakiest Coder that Jasmine had given me as a joke when I took the Meridian job, stood at the north-facing window with my back to the lobby for 7 minutes. Because here's the thing about being told never to come back. You get very good at performing the absence of feeling. You get so good at it that sometimes you can't tell the difference between performing it and the real thing. Before I get into this, please like and subscribe, but only if this story is already doing something to you. Drop your location and the time in the comments. I want to know exactly who is in this with me right now. I was born in Houston, Texas in 1993. The second child of Dr. Emmanuel Adeyemi and Grace Obi Adeyemi, both originally from Lagos, Nigeria. My father had come to the United States in 1987 at 26 years old, enrolled at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, arrived with $200 in his pocket, and the kind of unshakable certainty about his own future that I have spent my entire adult life trying to understand and failing to replicate. He wanted to be a cardiologist. He became one. He built a private cardiology practice in the 3rd Ward neighborhood of Houston, Dr. Emmanuel K. Adeyemi, M.D., FAC, that had a 3-month waiting list and a reputation that announced itself in rooms before he did. My father was not a man who talked about himself. He didn't need to. 30 years of patient outcomes did the talking. My mother, Grace, taught 3rd grade at Wheatley Elementary for 22 years. She had a voice that could calm a classroom of 8-year-olds in 3 seconds flat. That same voice could stop me mid-sentence across a dinner table with a single syllable of my name. She made jollof rice on Sundays that smelled like it had been assembled from something other than ingredients, something warmer and older than that. She sang in the choir at Covenant Redeemer Baptist on Almeida Road and wore her Sunday hats with the kind of authority that made other women turn and look again. She loved her children completely. She deferred to my father on everything that mattered. That was the architecture of our family, my father at the center, his vision extending outward like a structural blueprint that everyone else was expected to build their lives inside of. My brother Tobena. Everyone called him Toby, always. Even my father was 3 years older than me and genuinely exceptional. Not in the irritating golden child way that makes for clean drama. He was brilliant in a way that felt effortless, and he was kind in a way that felt genuine. And he wanted to become a doctor with the same real, authentic certainty my father had. He was pre-med at Rice University on a full academic scholarship by the time he was 17. He never seemed burdened by the expectation laid on him because it wasn't an expectation for Toby. It was just who he was. He inhabited our father's blueprint so naturally that you sometimes forgot it had been drawn by someone else. I loved my brother then. I love my brother now. But growing up 2 steps behind him was an education in invisibility that I've been processing in my therapist, Dr. Angie Brewster's office in the Galleria area for the last 2 years, and I'm still not done. I was not a bad student. Let me be clear about that. I was a very good student. I got A's in most things and a minuses in the rest. I made the honor roll at Lamar High School all 4 years. I ran cross-country, volunteered at the Houston Food Bank through our church, had 2 good friends and no disciplinary record. I was, by every measurable standard, a child who was doing fine. The problem was that, doing fine at the Adeyemi dinner table, sitting across from someone who was doing extraordinary, had a quality of disappearing about it that was hard to name until I was much older. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't even intention. It was just the particular shadow cast by a very bright light. My father never said he was disappointed in me. That was not his method. What he did instead was speak my future in the present tense as a fixed fact, already accomplished. Naomi will be a physician, he would say to relatives at our Thanksgiving table, to colleagues at the hospital fundraisers my parents attended every spring, to church friends over coffee after Sunday service, with the same even tone he used to state a clinical observation. Not a wish, not a plan under construction. A fait accompli, already decided, already written, waiting for time to catch up. What he didn't know, because I was very careful about what I showed him, was that I had already found something else. I started teaching myself to code at 15 on a desktop computer at the Houston Public Library. Luscan branch sitting in the third carrel from the window on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. YouTube tutorials first, then Codecademy, using a free account I accessed specifically on library computers because our home desktop had parental monitoring software, and I was fairly certain Father reviewed the activity logs. My computer science teacher at Lamar, a patient and slightly distracted man named Mr. Robert Okafor, noticed what I was doing in class one afternoon. I was 3 weeks ahead of the curriculum. And after the other students had cleared out, he set an old MacBook on my desk that the district was cycling out after a technology refresh. Told me to keep it in my locker, keep working. I built my first functioning web application at 16. It was a study scheduler, clunky, prone to crashing, limited to 8 class inputs before the whole thing fell apart, but it worked. I had made something work. I had looked at a problem, found a shape to hold it, and translated that shape into something real. When I showed it to my best friend Jasmine Carter one afternoon in her bedroom on the south side of Houston, her mom's soul music coming through the wall, the particular late afternoon light of a Texas October slanting across the floor. Jasmine looked at the screen for a long time without saying anything. Then she looked at me. "Naomi, you made this?" "Yeah, you should be studying this," she said. Seriously, like for real. I knew she was right. I had known it for a year. The distance between knowing something and being able to say it out loud inside the Adeyemi household was the widest gap I had ever tried to cross. I applied to the University of Texas at Austin in the fall of my senior year. I applied to the College of Natural Sciences, declared pre-medicine as my intended major, wrote my admissions essay about watching my father in his practice. The way his patients trusted him, the particular care he brought to every appointment, and every word of it was true. I was accepted with a partial merit scholarship covering 40% of my tuition and a $200 annual need-based grant. My father took us to Papado's on Westheimer to celebrate. My mother wore her blue dress. Toby drove in from his apartment near Baylor College of Medicine and gave a toast that made my mother press her hand to her collarbone the way she did when something moved her. It was a genuinely good night. What I did not tell them, not that night, not the following 14 months, was that the moment I arrived on the UT campus in August 2011 and walked into the advising office in Painter Hall, I added a second major, computer science. I want to ask you something right here. If your parents ever mapped your future out without asking you, your major, your career, your whole life already decided before you had a say in it, tell me what they had planned. Drop it in the comments, because I want to know how many of us grew up inside someone else's blueprint. UT Austin was the first place I had ever felt fully like myself. The particular difficulty of that was that I couldn't share it with anyone who mattered back home. I kept both tracks carefully separated. My Sunday calls home described biology labs and chemistry problem sets in detail, all of which were real. They did not describe the data structures course I was pulling an A+ in, or the operating systems project I'd stayed up until 3 in the morning to finish, or the fact that I had posted a flyer on the Jester Hall bulletin board offering intro programming tutoring at $25 an hour and had 6 regular clients by October. All of that was also real. I just didn't share it. I was not lying to my parents. I had a name for what I was doing. I was managing information. That distinction mattered to me at 19. It matters considerably less to me now. The conversation happened in October of my sophomore year. Fall break 4 days in Houston. I had rehearsed what I was going to say for 6 weeks. I had notes in my phone in a folder I'd titled Grocery List, so that if my father ever glanced at my screen, he wouldn't stumble across what was coming. It was a Thursday evening. My father had come home from the practice before 7. Was unusual enough that my mother had already set the table with the good dishes. Toby had driven in from his apartment near Baylor. All 4 of us sat down to dinner together, which almost never happened anymore. The kitchen smelled the way our kitchen always smelled. My mother's pepper soup on the stove, something warm and specific that I've never been able to replicate no matter how many times I've tried. The pendant light above the table cast a circle of gold over the food and all of us sighed it. My father asked about my MCAT preparation timeline. He laid it out with precision, the way he laid everything out. Start preparing the summer before junior year. Take the test the following September. Submit applications to UT Health Science Center and Baylor College of Medicine by October of senior year. He had done the research. He had a timeline, would learn later, printed and sitting on his study desk upstairs with my name at the top. He described it all while I sat with my fork over my plate of pounded yam and egusi soup, and I thought, if I don't say it now, I never will. Then what? I spend 40 years inside a life that doesn't fit and call it gratitude. Dad, I said, I've been double majoring. He put his fork down, computer science. I added it freshman year. I've been taking the courses alongside my pre-med requirements. The room went quiet in a way I had never heard before in that house. Not angry quiet, not surprised quiet, something more fundamental. The sound of a system encountering something it was not designed to process. You will drop it, my father said. I don't want to drop it. I want to be a software engineer. Know me. His voice was very low and very even, the way it always got when things were serious. When his voice dropped like that, the temperature in a room dropped with it. I have spent 30 years building the foundation of this family's future. Toby has honored that. I need you to honor it. I'm not dishonoring anything. I just want something different than what you've decided. My mother said, Naomi, please. 2 words, quiet as a door closing. I've known this since I was 15, I said. I should have told you sooner and I'm sorry I didn't, but I'm not dropping the CS major. My father looked at me for a long moment. He was 61 years old, and he had worked his way from a small apartment in Galveston to a cardiology practice that bore his name. He had done all of it through a combination of absolute certainty and absolute discipline. What was sitting across the dinner table from him was the first thing in 30 years that had not yielded to either of those tools. "Pursue this," he said. "I will not support it, not financially, not in any other way." "I understand. I don't think you do. This house," he gestured at the walls around us, at the house on Greenbrier Drive where I had grown up, everything it contained, "is not a safety net for a decision I don't support. If you choose this path, you choose everything that comes with it. You will not come back here looking for what you walked away from." Toby reached under the table and touched my arm. I kept my eyes on my father. I said, "Think very carefully. I've been thinking about it for 4 years." He nodded once. The clinical nod, final, closed, like signing off at the end of a consultation where all options had been considered and one selected. He picked up his fork. My mother stood up from the table and went to the kitchen. I could hear water running. We finished dinner. Nobody said anything else. The next morning I packed my bags. My father did not come out of his study. My mother stood on the front porch in her housecoat and held my face in both hands, the way she always had when she was trying to hold something she couldn't hold, and she looked at me for a moment that held too much inside it for either of us to speak. I got in the car. I drove back to Austin on the I-10 with $847 in my checking account, 3 hours of open road, nowhere to redirect what I was feeling except straight ahead. Back on campus that Monday, I went to the financial aid office in the Prather Hall basement and signed a private student loan at a 7.2% interest rate. My father's $800 monthly contribution, rent, food, basic expenses, was gone as of that conversation. I called the leasing office the same week and moved from my apartment on West Campus into a smaller room in a complex on East 38th Street. $540 a month, shared bathroom, no parking. I picked up a third tutoring client, then a part-time position at the campus IT help desk, $14.50 an hour, 12 hours a week around my course schedule. I called Toby once a week. He always called back. "I did not call home. I need to ask you something. I want you to really think about it." Have you ever been given an ultimatum by someone who was supposed to love you without conditions? The kind. Choosing yourself meant losing them. Have you ever been told that the price of your dream was your family? 'Cause I still think about that dinner table. I still think about the version of that conversation that might have ended differently. Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Here is what the next 3 years actually looked like. 'Cause choosing yourself is one of those phrases that sounds clean and empowered until you're living inside it. Then it mostly feels like a series of small, exhausting choices made at 11 o'clock at night under fluorescent light. Junior year, 17 credit hours both semesters. 6 hours of sleep on a good night, 4 on a bad one. Rice and frozen broccoli from the H-E-B on Guadalupe 4 nights a week because it was $2.49 a bag, and a box of rice lasted 2 weeks. My cross trainers wore through to the sole by February, and I put duct tape across the insoles for 6 weeks until a tutoring week, good enough to justify a new pair from Target. What kept me going was the work itself, the systems, the logic, the clean precision of a well-written function. The way you could take something broken, find its shape, and make it run. There was a feeling in those late-night lab sessions in the Gates Dell complex. The building half empty at 2 in the morning and the city dark outside that I've thought about many times since. It was something between recognition and relief. Like finding a language that had always been native to me before I'd ever had words for it. I graduated in May 2015, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, minor in Mathematics, GPA 3.81. Dean's List for 5 semesters. I walked across the stage at the Frank Irwin Center in a black gown with the May, Texas heat already cutting through it. In the crowd I found Jasmine Carter in her own gown 2 rows behind me. Marketing degree, always 2 rows behind me at every major moment, always precisely there. And my brother Toby in the family section in a pale blue button-down, standing and clapping like the building had given him no other option. My parents did not come. I had sent an email, not a phone call. A phone call would have required something from me that I didn't have left. My father replied 48 hours later. 3 lines. "We received your email. Congratulations on your degree. I hope you find what you're looking for." That was the last direct communication I had from him for 3 years. The 6 months after graduation were the hardest stretch of all of it. Harder than junior year, harder than the morning I drove back to Austin with $847. In school, there is always a next assignment, a next exam, next fixed point to orient yourself toward. After graduation, there is just time. And the job market, the private terror of having bet everything on yourself and now needing to actually collect. 3 interviews in June. 2 phone screens that went nowhere. One on site at a startup called Vertex Labs in Austin, seed-funded 15 employees, logistics software. That ended with the founder telling me my experience was impressive but entry-level. Thanked him and smiled and cried in my car in the parking garage on 6th Street for 22 minutes. Then I drove home, opened my laptop, submitted 4 more applications. The offer came from Silverline Analytics, a mid-size fintech company in Austin, entry-level software engineer position, $64,000 a year. I started in August 2015 and spent the next 2 years learning more in practice than I had in 4 years of coursework. Jasmine had taken a marketing job at a healthcare firm in the domain. We moved into a 2-bedroom on North Lamar for $1,275 a month, $637.50 each, and built the kind of shared life that looks chaotic from outside and feels like family from inside. She made playlists for every mood I cycled through. I made spreadsheets for every shared expense. She was better at cooking. I was better at dishes. We drove each other to the airport and showed up, every single time, without being asked. She was the first person I told about the silence from my parents. Not the full story, not all at once, but enough. One night in our kitchen in December 2015, the first winter after graduation, cold enough in Austin to actually need a coat. Sat across from her with my hands around a mug of tea and told her the shape of it. The dinner, the ultimatum, the 3 lines of email. The graduation nobody attended. She listened the way Jasmine always listened, still attentive, without flinching or rushing toward a silver lining or making it smaller than it was. When I finished, she put her hand over mine on the table and said, "That is their loss. You know that, right? You know that. I was working on believing it." But hearing her say it, without qualification, without condition, mattered. It mattered more than I was able to tell her at the time. Silverline, I met Marcus Webb, 44, senior engineer, formerly IBM, with the rare gift of giving feedback that felt like being taught rather than corrected. He reviewed a payment routing system I'd spent 3 weeks building, called me into his office, and said, "You have a real instinct for efficiency. Don't let anyone in this industry flatten that out of you." I've thought about that sentence more times than I can count. I've tried to pay it forward to every junior engineer I've worked with since. 2 years in, Marcus referred me for a senior engineer opening at Meridian Financial Technologies in Houston. $112,000 salary, full benefits, equity vesting over 4 years. A team manager named Diane Kowalski, 48, ran tight ships, zero tolerance for nonsense, the best manager I've ever had. And a team of 8 engineers who were all genuinely good at their jobs and decent to each other, which is rarer than it sounds. Moving back to Houston felt like something I needed to claim. This was my city. I had grown up here. I rented a place in Midtown, $1,450 a month, 2nd floor, big windows facing a courtyard where someone had planted bougainvillea that turned pink every spring. I set up my space carefully. Standing desk, ergonomic chair, proper monitor, and both diplomas in matching frames above the screen. For guests. For me, every morning when I sat down and got to work on something that was entirely mine. Tell me about your Jasmine. The one who showed up when your family stepped back. The one who put their hand over yours, or drove across the city at midnight, or said the exact thing you needed to hear without you having to ask. Drop their name in the comments and tell me one thing they did that you've never forgotten. I want to hear it. I had been at Meridian for 14 months when my brother Toby called on a Sunday evening in September. He was a third-year emergency medicine resident at Houston Methodist by then, working the kind of hours that stripped the easy warmth out of a person and replaced it with something more careful and clear-eyed. We talked every 2 weeks, regular calls. His rotation, my projects, Jasmine's promotion to marketing director, the Texans season. He called at 9:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I'd set my phone face up on the coffee table, which I only do when I'm actually winding down. I saw his name light the screen and answered before the second ring finished. "Hey," he said, that one syllable. Something underneath it. What happened? Dad had a cardiac event last week. I was holding a glass of wine. I set it on the coffee table with both hands, precisely, like I was handling something that required care. How bad? They're calling it mild. He's home. He's stable. But, Naomi, Mom's been asking about you. I think they've been trying to find out where you are. How much did you tell them? Nothing you didn't give me permission to share. I want you to know that. I didn't give them your address or your job. But Dad's smart, and he's been sitting at home with nothing but time for a week. Think he looked up your LinkedIn. We talked for 30 more minutes. Toby described the cardiac event in clinical terms, the particular irony of a cardiologist being treated by his own colleagues was something neither of us commented on directly. And what the recovery protocol would look like, what our mother had been like in the Methodist waiting room. She kept saying your name, he said quietly. Just, where is Naomi, Toby? Like she expected you to walk through the door. I didn't sleep well that night. Monday morning I drove to Meridian and wrote the most focused code of my entire career. Because it was the only precise thing I could do with what was sitting in my chest, I answered every message in my queue. I reviewed 2 pull requests. 10 did stand up at 10 and said everything expected of me and nothing extra. At 11:15, Priya appeared at the edge of my desk, her voice very carefully neutral. Hey, that couple is still in the lot. Silver Camry, second row. I turned my chair. There they were. My father in the charcoal suit, sitting very straight against the passenger's seat with his hands resting on his knees. The formal, deliberate posture of a man who prepares before he speaks. My mother with the blue and gold scarf around her hair. Parked in a visitor space. The loading zone, not double parked, not blocking anything. Parked correctly, deliberately. People who had come prepared to wait as long as it took. 3 years of silence lived in my body. 3 years ago, I had $847 in duct tape on the soles of my shoes and 3 lines of email that wished me well without meaning it. I had a graduation they didn't attend. I had 6 months of rice and broccoli and 4-hour nights and crying in parking garages. I had Marcus Webb telling me I had an instinct for efficiency, and Jasmine's hand on mine in the December kitchen. Diane saying in my first performance review that I was the strongest technical hire she'd made in 3 years. I had Meridian Financial Technologies behind me, the glass, the title on my badge, the work I had done every single day without anyone's permission or endorsement or belief. And they were sitting in the parking lot of it, correctly parked, waiting. I want to ask you this, and I mean it sincerely. If you were standing where I was standing, your whole built life behind you, 3 years of no contact in your body, the people who told you never to come back, sitting in the lot of the thing you'd built without them, what would you have done? Tell me honestly in the comments, because what I did next surprised even me. I told Diane I was taking a long lunch. I walked out through the lobby glass doors at 11:52 a.m. The October air hit me. Houston in October has a specific texture, warm at the surface with something cooler moving underneath it. The first real suggestion that summer has finally agreed to leave. The parking lot smelled like asphalt and the cut grass from the landscaping strip along the building's south edge. I walked to the Camry and stopped at the driver's side window. My mother saw me first. She pressed her palm flat against the glass, one hand, before I'd even raised mine to knock. My father turned from the passenger seat. I looked at them for a moment. 2 people who had made me, who had given me the stubbornness and the discipline, and the love of systems, the absolute refusal to do things halfway that had carried me from dinner table to this parking lot, who had also said what they'd said and meant it. I knocked. My mother had the door open before my knuckles finished. She stepped out onto the asphalt, and she was smaller than I remembered. Or I had grown, not in height but in some other dimension that height doesn't measure. And she took my face in both hands the way she had on the porch of the house on Greenbrier Drive 3 years ago, and said, "Naomi," and her voice broke on the second syllable. I held her. I couldn't help it. She was my mother. It had been 3 years. My father stepped out of the passenger side slowly, moving with the new carefulness of a man who has recently been reminded that his body keeps its own account. He was 64 years old. The gray in his hair had spread. He held himself the same way, very straight, very prepared, but something in his face was different. Absolute certainty I had grown up under had shifted. There was asking in it now. We looked at each other across the roof of the Silver Camry. "Somi," he said. Dad, he was quiet for a moment. Then, said it the way he said everything, precisely, without preamble. The ultimatum. How I handled that conversation. I was wrong about how I handled it. I stood very still. I told myself for years that I was protecting this family's future, he continued. But I was protecting my version of what the future should look like. I didn't ask you what you wanted. I didn't. He stopped. His jaw moved slightly, the way it did when he was recalibrating. I found your name a few months ago. I looked you up. He meant LinkedIn. He meant the title, the company name, the endorsements from colleagues whose words made clear, without any ambiguity, what his daughter had become. I know what you've built, he said, and I know I had nothing to do with it. My mother was holding my hand. I didn't know when she'd taken it. We went to lunch at a diner on Westheimer called The Roost. The kind of place with vinyl booths and sweet tea and slices of pie under glass domes on. The counter and the smell of coffee that has been on the burner since 7 in the morning and has long since stopped apologizing for it. It was not a landmark restaurant. It was not a special occasion place. It was available and close and real, which was exactly right for what we were doing. We sat in a corner booth and talked for 2 hours. Some of it was hard. There were silences that had weight to them, and 2 moments where my father started a sentence and couldn't find how to finish it. 1 moment where I had to look at the ceiling for a few seconds, because the thing sitting in my throat needed a moment before I could speak. Around it, my mother cried once quietly, looking at the table. Not dramatic, not performed. Just the small private sound of something long, held finally releasing a little of its pressure. I told them about Marcus Webb, and what his words had meant at a moment when no one from my family was saying anything at all. I told them about the apartment with the bougainvillea, and the diplomas I'd put up for myself, and not for anyone else, what it had felt like to choose my own walls for the first time. My father listened with his full, focused, clinical attention, really tracking, just waiting for his turn. When I described the Silverline years, the tutoring money, the broccoli and rice, the duct-taped shoes, he went very still. He didn't look away. I didn't know how difficult it was, he said finally. You didn't ask? A pause. Long enough to mean something. No, he said, I didn't. The check came and he reached for it without hesitating, the reflex of a father. And I take it. Some things don't need to be contested. Come for Sunday dinner, he said, walking back to the parking lot. When you're ready. Before. He said it carefully, not as a summons, as an invitation. The difference was real and he understood it. Okay, I said. He put his hand on my shoulder. Brief, deliberate, the kind of physical gesture that costs a man like my father something to offer. For that reason it landed. Then he got in the car. I watched them pull onto Westheimer and drive west toward the house on Greenbrier Drive. I stood in the afternoon sun for a moment before I turned around and walked back through the lobby glass doors of the building that held my work. The first Sunday dinner was 6 weeks later. It was awkward in the way that things are when the vocabulary between people has to be rebuilt from scratch after a long silence. When you keep reaching for old patterns of conversation and finding that they no longer fit. My father asked about my work at Meridian with focused attention, and when I explained the systems I was building, he asked follow-up questions more specific than I expected. He understood more than I thought he would. Systems are systems, whether they're cardiac or digital. Neither of us said that out loud, but I think we both noticed it. My mother made jollof rice and fried plantains and a pepper soup that tasted exactly the way it had always tasted. The exact same warmth and richness. Sat in my old seat at the table and thought about how strange it is that a bowl of food can contain an entire childhood inside it. Toby was there. He was the connective tissue, filling silences with easy conversation, laughing at things that were only slightly funny, doing what he had always quietly done, maintaining the thread. I owe him more than I've ever known how to say. We are not what we were. That is the most honest thing I can tell you. I see my parents once or twice a month now. My mother and I talk on Thursday evenings. She has adopted Jasmine as a personal topic of interest, asks about her promotion, her new apartment, the man she's been seeing since the fall, and she worries at length about things that don't require worrying, which is her particular love language, and always has been. My father and I are still finding our rhythm. There are questions between us that haven't been asked yet. Things I'm not sure either of us knows how to say. But something is being built, carefully, like people who know the ground is still tender. My therapist, Dr. Brewster, asked me once what I actually wanted from the relationship with my parents going forward. I thought about it for a while before I answered. Not what I should have had, I said. I think I've set that down, just something real. Daniel asked me last spring if I had forgiven my father. Daniel Park, 33, architect, the most careful asker of questions I have ever known. We were sitting on my couch with the windows open and the bougainvillea pink against the courtyard wall and Meridian the cat. 7 months old, already a complete tyrant about the good blanket, asleep between us. I've let it stop being the thing I carry everywhere, I said. Whether that's forgiveness, I genuinely don't know. Maybe it's just what comes next. He thought about that. That sounds like enough, he said. I think he was right. I'm 31 years old. I'm sitting at my standing desk on a Thursday evening with my second monitor open and the bougainvillea catching the last of the Houston light through my big windows, and Meridian the cat asleep on the arm of my couch, my savings account at $81,400, which is a number I made from scratch. I have a career I built without anyone's permission. I have a Jasmine who has never once let me carry something heavy alone. I have a brother who maintained the line when I couldn't reach across it. I have parents I am slowly learning to know as the people they actually are, rather than the people I needed them to be, which is, it turns out, a harder and more interesting project than either version. And I have this story, all of it. $847, and the duct tape and the parking garage on 6th Street and the jollof rice that smelled like something older than ingredients and the 3 lines of email and the October parking lot and the diner on Westheimer and the bougainvillea and the diploma frames I put up for myself. I would not trade one chapter of it for the easier version. Not one. If you see yourself anywhere in what I've told you, if you know that dinner table, specific silence, that particular cost of being yourself inside a family that needs you to be someone else. Tell me what you would have done. Leave a comment below. I want to hear from you, and if you want more stories like this one, check the description.